Hi, gang, this is Tim. This particular episode of The Universe Between Your Ears has a little bit of a different start to it. Our guest is a friend of Gabi and I, and so when the three of us got online together, we just jumped right into conversation. And I didn't get a chance to introduce her to you folks until we were a few minutes in. But I also didn't want to lose the stuff that we had just got finished talking about. So we left it in. You'll hear all of this. I do eventually give you her intro. But we'll leave her as a little bit of a surprise to you, I guess, until we get around to that. So hope you enjoy it. And as soon as the regular intro music is done, then we'll jump straight into conversation. See you there. Consciousness, the final frontier. These are the voyages into the universe between your ears. Our mission, to explore collective wisdom, seek out amazing secrets, and spread the message of personal potential.
I cannot pass, like if I see I like those antique malls and I go to, and if I see an object from way in the past and it just carries this energy, sometimes it's beautiful, say even a cup, sometimes I could be like looking at, I was like, where is it made? Oh my God, it's in England from probably in the 30s, and who knows who drank from this cup,
No kidding, yeah. No,
an exquisite, interesting ornament or whatever.
Well, and it holds energy too. It holds energy at that time, and so sometimes you got to be mindful of what you pick up too, because you don't want to bring that energy if it's stuck with you back in your house, so you could clear it and stuff like that. But anyway,
very true, very true. So I'm hoping that when I am holding it, and if it makes me really feel excited and good, do you think that maybe it's already an indication that it doesn't carry that bad energy?
It could be that this person who had it had just really good energy, and
and I'm still getting
yeah, exactly,
totally.
There's so much of that is intertwined with your stuff, other stuff. It's like it's never a linear thing. It's like a matrix. So everything's kind of interconnected in more ways than in more ways than we know either.
Yeah. We started already, right, Tim?
Well, I haven't done any kind of introduction. We haven't actually sort of launched the conversation. We're talking.
We keep distracting.
well, to finish this topic, it's important. I think that, you see, when we got here in 1991, we needed to basically leave all material things behind.
Wow.
Right? And so all these objects that we had from childhood, my grandfather's possessions, all of that, all these different interesting sentimental value kind of things, right? They're all left behind. And so I look around and it's like, I don't have anything that's around me that came from my childhood. Sometimes I'm thinking, right? I can't relate to anything on that level, right? And, so the oldest thing that I have, three figurines I got that didn't get broken in the luggage. That my grandfather brought from Germany. He was in the war, Second World War. I think he brought them from Germany when he came back. He got a lot of stuff like this sewing machine Zinger. Everybody got that. A bunch of different things. But as far as the souvenirs, right? German-made, beautiful Farfur figurines, beautiful. And I got them, and I am treasuring them. I'm holding them. And you probably saw them.
I don't know.
I'll show you next time. They're right there. Cool. Yeah. And they're nothing special. Right. I mean, they're probably cheap souvenirs from Germany or whatever.
But you know what? It's the story behind it.
Exactly.
It's the connection that you had with it and how it made you feel. And sometimes that's what people think is like it's a mixed bag, and how I tell it that. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it also keeps you in the past if you're not willing to move forward. So it's like a double-edged sword with that. So, it's just like for me, if I had to lose a lot of my stuff, I'm not going to lie to you. It would probably, affect me to some degree, especially like, photographs or something from my parents that, I really treasured. That would be difficult. And then again, you really don't know how you're going to respond to something until you're actually in it too. You have all these things, this plan thought out that I'm going to do this, this, and this, but when you're actually in it and what you're experiencing in the moment just supersedes everything that you could have ever planned. And so
it makes me think this friend of mine, and we interviewed her, Lisa. Winston. She lost her house in one of the fires, and they had 10 minutes to get out. And I saw a video from her phone. Flames. It's all you could see was flames. Yeah. And it was really, really scary. And so it's one of the things that she has said is that part of that experience was being completely freed of, you're freed of the ability, I guess, maybe, or the option to go back and long for the past or whatever, and wallow in that. Yeah. So, but it's like everything else that happens. It's whatever contrast, right? It's how do you want to look at it? Yeah. There's probably something to the negative, something uncomfortable or unwanted in everything that happens to us.
Oh, absolutely.
Even though in the long run, something might turn out to be great.
Well, and I'm going to just add to what you're saying, Tim, too, is that
but that was complete.
It was complete. No, but what's interesting too is that everybody's on their path, and so they're learning different things about themselves and experiencing themselves with the contrast. And talking about the fires and I see fire as a transformation, and it's like a shift. It's like the symbol of the phoenix rising from the ashes. That's what fire is in my world as far as the accompany of that, because it's breaking things down so that something better can be created out of that. It's just transforming it into something new. Interestingly enough, I've been in San Diego for almost 30 years, so I've seen several of the fires over the last couple decades, and one of them in particular came right up to my good friend's home and property line up in Valley Center. And, luckily for them, the firefighters were fighting it off, and, their house was like a boundary, but the flames came right up the valley, right up to their backyard, and it was really kind of surreal with that whole experience. And then I knew other people, too, that lost their homes, but I think the thing that was really puzzling for me was that why the fire would hit certain homes and the ones next to it would be completely untouched or unscathed. And you would see this in pockets all over the place. And so one time I just sat in meditation with that, and I pondered that question, and what kind of came through to me was that the fire does have a consciousness, and it knows where it needs to go in order to do do whatever it needs to do to create the contrast or whatever it needs for those people who are part of that or that experience. And it made a lot of sense to me when I got that information, but it was like I was always a puzzlement why, when fire would come in, you would see, the majority of the neighborhood be touched, and then there would be solo houses where nothing had happened at all. It was mind-boggling to me. And so that was a real important piece for me to realize that, there's consciousness not just with us human beings, but with objects, with elements, with, animals. There's more to consciousness than what we really have a grasp of. So.
Okay. I want to jump in here. We're going to do something different this time around, because what we've just been talking about the last few minutes, I think this is valuable. So we're going to do your introduction right now.
Okay, cool.
And we're going to that'll be like the
segue.
Where they give you a big chunk of the movie first, and then they start rolling credits.
No worries.
I think the listeners will understand that. have history together, right?
They're stuck with it, whether they understand it or they don't. Who is this person?
Who is this
All
firefighter?
right, so let's make it official. Hello and welcome to everybody out there in podcast land. I'm Tim Starr. You are listening to or watching the universe between your ears. I'm joined by my illustrious co-host, Mr. Gabi Mushayev.
Hello, great to be here again. Hello to everyone.
And we have a fun guest with us, friend of ours, Dr. Dolores Fazzino. Dolores is Doctor of Nursing Practice, DNP. She's also a nurse practitioner. She's a transformational coach, speaker, author. She's a distinguished pioneer and visionary bridging the world of spirituality and wellness. Her company's Recovering Healthcare and Concierge Surgical Coaching prepare patients for a successful surgery. She's assisted in approximately 9,000 surgeries over a 40-year career in nursing. She worked under the revolutionary Dr. Bernie Siegel. Dolores, thank you for being here.
And thank you, Tim and Gabby. I am just honored and delighted to be able to share this time with you.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. It's already been fun.
Yes, it has.
This is really was the, in signing up to be a guest on this show, we asked people to provide a short bio, and I just gave you the short version of her short bio. You are a busy woman.
Yes, I am.
So we've got no shortage of things to talk about, but now that we've got the intro completed, let's go back to what we were just saying, because I was just on your blog on one of your sites, and I was reading your piece about the 9/11 events.
Yeah.
And where you were talking about all of which is a really tough thing for a lot of people to accept, and especially, the closer you are, the tougher it's going to be. But the idea that everybody whose lives was lost in that event or events, they were a willing at some level on some plane. They were a willing participant in those events, and it's a little bit related, I think, to what we were just talking about. The idea that everything has a consciousness. There's nothing that's really truly inanimate, right? Even every atom, every cell of everything that's out there has some element of consciousness to it. I just read something around this effect not too long ago also. And it's sort of the idea, if I remember it correctly, is they were saying that atoms of a particular type find a way of finding other atoms of the same type and come together. So you have a rock, it's not thinking, it's not, it's not walking around and talking to other rocks, but there is some sort of presence that's in there.
Well, I'm going to say, too, I think there's also some attraction, because we know like attracts like. And so, when elements come together and they kind of co-create, if you want to call it that, there's some similar frequency or energy there that's allowing it. Everything that we know and see emits an energetic field around it. And we know as human beings that our energy field is what our thoughts are, what our beliefs are, what our connection is to source, but also our connection to our physical body as well, because everything is interconnected. And the thing being is that when those pieces it's almost like these pieces are part of an orchestra. Okay, and if anybody has ever played in an orchestra, have you ever played a musical instrument or were in a band or orchestra or anything like that, or even in the choir? It's like everybody has their part, and it's just like when everything is kind of in the flow, everybody comes in the right time where no words need to be elicited. It's just more of a feel. It's like you're in the flow of it. I experience that a lot when I'm working with surgery patients or in surgery. It's just like when everybody knows their part, it's like surgery's like a big orchestra. Every part is kind of played without saying, you need to pay attention here, unless, somebody's the conductor's going ting, 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 ting. But it's just like it's an orchestration. You could go through a whole case where no words are exchanged, but everybody knows what everybody's thinking and knows what the next step is because you're in the flow of it. What's interesting is that I remember I had one surgeon colleague of mine who said, don't think, it weakens the team. Because when you start thinking, well, I was thinking this, it's just like the hiccups start happening.
Yeah.
It's like get out of the flow of things. And there's something to be said about that, just not only as that as an example, but just in life too. If we are going along our paths and things are wonderful, you're in the moment, and then all of a sudden you have a doubt about something, that's like you've popped out from being in the present reality to popping in your head and popping out of that, so it just kind of stops. And, Abraham Hicks and Esther and Abraham, they kind of call that like wobbling. Your disc is wobbling because it's just like you're in the flow and it's kind of everything's happening, and then you're starting to have some self-doubt, and it's just like you're wavering back and forth. So it's like creating that unrest. So,
well, it's in sports. It's they would say you're in the zone.
Exactly.
And it may not even have anything to do with self-doubt, but you start to think about something,
Exactly.
It has the same effect. Doesn't matter.
It's more like a distraction.
Yeah.
And, sometimes the distraction is on an unconscious level versus a conscious level. And all of a sudden something pops in. But how many times in life are we all distracted by what's happening to us or what's happening around us? And
only when I'm awake.
Well, now that could be taken on many different levels. Physically awake, mentally awake.
An interesting point you're making, Dolores, because I have 4 doctors in my family, and one of them is a famous surgeon as well. And so when they came here and they started like getting, I guess, certified and becoming doctors here in the U.S., right? Mm-hmm. One thing, and of course we had a lot of conversations at the dinner table or whatever, they all said how different the approach was here in the U.S. to surgery and to any procedure, but especially to surgery, that everyone knew exactly what they needed to do to respond quickly. Thinking was really like almost eliminated because it was like really well defined what had to be done in response to every scenario possible. Right. And I guess that eliminated any delays and allowed like efficiency, because the response time is important, right? Mm-hmm. And also eliminated wobbling, but I never thought of that this way when you brought it up, right?
But like I was saying before, you always walk a fine line with that, because too much of being in the flow of everything, sometimes you might have a tendency to get lazy. Do you understand what I'm saying? And it's just like that's where like it's like walking a fine line between the ego versus this. It's not a this or that.
Lazy meaning not alert, right?
Yeah, like taking things for granted.
Yeah,
almost. You know what I'm saying? Just assuming that it's always going to be that way.
Yeah.
And I think a classic example of this on a big, broad scale had a lot to do with everything that happened in 2008 with the economic collapse that everybody experienced globally. It's like you could have bet your paycheck on up until 2008 that everything was going to be like X, Y, and Z all lined up and everything was going to be perfect and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden the rug got pulled out from everybody on an economic state and how do you get people's attention to wake up? Sometimes it's like you hit them in the economic pocketbook. Do you know what I'm saying? And our energetic pocketbook, because I know a lot of people, even myself, went through a big metamorphosis as far as what's really important. And I know for myself, and it's been 10 years plus, everything outside of me has been in flux and unstable. It's never been consistent like it had been prior to 2008. So what does that mean? How do we gain that safety and security? It's by coming within yourself and feeling that from within yourself, and knowing that no matter what else is going on around you, I'm okay, I'm safe, and I'm okay right here, right now. So I believe that we get wake-up calls, and I'm going to touch back on what Tim was talking earlier about my experience with 9/11, is that we get periodic wake-up calls for humanity to really wake up at a big stance. I think the 2008 economic crisis was one of those huge wake-up calls. And I think that was a big wave of people realizing that they're really unhappy, that money doesn't buy you stability or security. How do you gain security is within yourself. So you've seen a big awakening of people between 2008 and now, and it continues to come in a wave where people are waking up and realizing that the only way that I could be okay is like to be okay with me. There's still people out there that still have their head in the sand that probably will not wake up, and maybe there'll be another crisis or something, and it'll be an opportunity to wake up. Going back even to 9/11, back in the early part of the turn of the century, it's hard to fathom that everybody participates in a grander scheme of things than we know, and we're just getting fleeting glimpses of what happens before we are actually born into this incarnation. There's a lot of pre-planning that goes into that. There's books that support that, where there's been people who have people who are highly intuitive, who don't know each other, that were given a set of circumstances, and they would tap into those circumstances and get very similar reports as to what happened before the birthing of this that created the need to have X, Y, and Z experiences. So there's literature out there that was written like 20 years ago that is very, this stuff was written way ahead of its time, but it's very absolute for this time period right now because people are ready to hear it. They weren't ready 10 or 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. Going back to 9/11, I believe that was a huge wake-up call. And it was actually one of my personal initiations for a lot of the work that I do in another dimension, and that's helping people cross over, souls that are stuck in this dimension that are needing to go and get crossed over to the light. Now, I want to just talk about mass experiences where there's catastrophic loss of life very quickly. There was a lot of people, a lot of chaos that had happened energetically when all of those towers were coming down and all the energy of people and their families and stuff like that. So whenever there's a mass loss, there's a lot of, if you think there's chaos, and from what we can see in the physical, there's chaos on an energetic standpoint where there's a lot of confusion. People don't know where they need to go. Some people don't know that they've passed. Some people don't know that they don't know how to move on to the next place of where they need to go. This has been happening with any type of catastrophic experience. If there's been like a tragedy, like with the big
it's like a spiritual wound happened, right?
Yes and no, but it's just like there's so much chaos, people don't know what direction to go. Mm-hmm. So what happens sometimes is like these souls are landlocked. They might not know that they're dead, or they just don't know how to get out of where they're at to move on because they're still confusing. Or the thing is they're attached to family or something in the physical mm-hmm. that they're having a difficult time letting go of and releasing. So I'll just share the story briefly so everybody who's listening has a concept of what was going on. 9/11 was a very scary time for me because I was just stunned that something like to that extent happened in the United States, because I always thought that we were safe and we were off limits. But that was a game changer for me. I think, as a matter of fact, I sat in front of the TV for 2 weeks in just utter disbelief of what I was hearing and experiencing. And shortly after that, I was to be flying up to Northern California to visit my sister, who was from the East Coast, who was attending an event up there, and I was going to meet up with her. And it was at a retreat center, and so I decided that I wasn't going to allow what had happened with 9/11 to affect me as far as me living my life. If it was my time to go, I'm totally okay with that. I'm going. I'm not going to let something like this paralyze me so I don't move and enjoy my life. That's when they win. Mm-hmm. So I went up there, and it was a very beautiful place. They had a labyrinth, and I don't know if you're familiar with what labyrinths are, but labyrinths are like a walking maze where you could walk in that, and it's kind of convoluted, so it kind of reminds you of walking on a pathway where you're going from the external to the internal, like going from consciousness to unconsciousness. It's a real deep walking type of meditation. Lecarte's labyrinth is an example of that. That, I believe, is in France. And they've been around for a while, so I've walked labyrinths before, but I was very drawn to this. But also at that time, too, I was feeling this energy around me, and it felt like the energy of my grandfather. My grandfather and he passed away when I was about 3 years old, but I really felt a very strong spiritual connection with him, even as a little girl. Because with him, everything felt safe and secure. But when he passed away suddenly, I felt that was missing. So he's been one of my mentors on the other side for my entire life, basically. So whenever he shows up for me, something big is going to happen on a spiritual level. This has been the patterning over my lifetime. So he was there in my energy. I could feel him, so I knew something was going to happen on this, very shortly. So I started walking down the pathways of this labyrinth, and I got to the center. And in the center, there's like what they call a rose, like a 6-petaled rose. And each petal stands for a different aspect of humanity, like maybe consciousness, maybe spirituality. And, sometimes you just are drawn to different areas. So once I got to the center, I was there, and I just felt as if somebody was energetically grabbing my energy and pulling me out of my physical body. And so I said to myself, just a minute, let me ground myself so I could be, planted someplace and where I needed to go. I just knew I needed to do that, and I did it. After I did that, next thing I knew, I was in Northern California, and then I was also in New York City where 9/11 had occurred. I was standing with the debris, and the debris energetically, it's more of like astral traveling and being in your etheric body, because our etheric body is like a less denser version energy field of us that looks like us, but it's almost like ghostly a little bit. So I was in 2 locations. I was in Northern California, and I was over in New York City, where the Twin Towers, the rubble remains of the Twin Towers. What I experienced when I was there was this overwhelming emotion of sadness, loss, and grief. I started sobbing uncontrollably, and I just couldn't stop. And then I noticed that in front of me there was 3 people lined up to see me that had passed away. They were still there energetically. And one of the gals she was probably a little shorter than me. She had the darkest curly hair I've ever seen. She was beautiful, and she was probably in her early 20s. And she said to me, teach me how to fly. I don't remember how to fly. And so I said to her, okay, so just close your eyes and just take my hand and just imagine yourself being lifted off. And then she went off onto the other side. The next person that came up was a man who was probably in his early 30s, a businessman looking type of guy in a suit. And he said, I'm really worried about my wife and children. I have a young family, and I want to make sure that they're going to be okay. And, I'm just really scared. And I assured him, they're going to be okay. Just know and trust that. and it's time for you to move to where you need to go, and just allow yourself to do that, and just know that they're going to be watched over and protected. And so I helped him cross over to the other side. And then the last one was a gentleman who was also in his 30s. I believe he was a firefighter, even though he didn't present himself as one, but I just felt that he was there, and he perished in that as he was trying to rescue people. And he said, I don't know how to fly, teach me how to fly. And so I helped him cross over as well, and then there was nobody else in line. But the emotion that I was experiencing was as if there was so much chaos that was there when everything happened on an energetic level, that the residual of that was there, and people were lost. They didn't know where to go. Even though they didn't have a physical body, they were very much there, and just energetically their souls were still trapped there. So after that was done, I started my journey from the inside of the labyrinth back out, and made it out. And when I turned around and looked at the center of the labyrinth, in the middle, 3 butterflies took off from the center.
Wow.
And it was the most profound thing I've ever experienced, because the butterflies are transformation, very symbolic, and each one of them was one of those souls that transformed and was able to move on to the next level. I was blown out of the water with this for a very long time. I didn't really share it for a very long time with people who just didn't understand that. I had some mentors who were my teachers, and I did share it with them, and they said that you got initiated. This is the work that you probably will be doing the rest of your life, or had been doing, and now you're very conscious of it. So I really am honored and humbled to be able to do that for people. People who I know in my immediate family, when they cross over, they always come to visit, even though they aren't physically deceased. If there are days before or even days after they are deceased, the energy will come into my house. I've had numerous experiences and sightings about that. And I'm just feeling an overwhelming sense of appreciation and compassion, but also that they thought highly of me to say goodbye. Do you understand? You know what I'm saying? It's hard to say. It's like, it's hard to put that into words, but the thing is, it's like, I just feel that, the appreciation that they thought enough of me to say goodbye.
To reveal themselves to you.
Exactly, as they were leaving to go on to their next part of their journey. Mm-hmm. So, like I said, I've been humbled. I've learned so much. And I don't take this work lightly. I just feel it's an honor to be able to help people do this. And so that's the story about that. And you're absolutely right on, Tim, when you say some people aren't ready to hear stuff like that, because I did post that, or I wrote an article about that, and I did post it on LinkedIn right around the time of an anniversary of 9/11, and I got blasted from a few people in regards to that, because one lady in particular said, how could you feel that this is a gift? You didn't lose anybody there. I mean, they were still angry at this whole thing and not seeing the gift in the whole situation. And it's like, how do you assist a person who is in so much pain from that? And it's just like, you just have to love them up and send them love and just wish them well. And it's not about a right or wrong thing. This was an actual experience I had. They're having their actual experience as well. Yeah. It's just that I wasn't directly affected like they were, but I still was affected on some level. So yeah, it's a very it's a delicate topic, especially when people are grieving the loss of somebody and they can't see anything good coming out of any situation. They're just so the whole angry. And I've had a colleague and a friend of mine who lost her daughter about 4 years ago to a suicide, and she really had a tough time with it. And, of course she never wanted to hear well, you know something good's going to come out of it. I always know that. That's just my belief. And I just kept holding the space for her. However, when people are so angry, they start projecting that anger onto you. Sometimes you need to shut the door on that relationship because that's not healthy either.
Yeah.
So it's like knowing when to show them and when to fold them, and so, it's everybody's on their own path and in their own timing. But to make a long story short, with, my friend who lost her daughter, she ended up setting up a foundation called the Abundant Love Project, where what she has done is she's also an artist and graphic artist. She would pick up stones at the beach and put beautiful designs on the front of them and the back and says, "You are loved." And she would strategically place them in different places all over the place.
I have one right here.
Yeah. What does it say? Turn around. Does it say "You are loved"?
You are loved, yeah.
Yes,
right,
that is her. That is her project. Yeah. And so the thing is...
It came with a note here.
Yes.
Beautiful note.
Yes. So So this is how this happened. This woman was in so much grief over this that this is now an international project 4 years later, and it's touching a lot of lives because her wish was that if somebody could pick up a stone like that has a message, maybe it would save them from trying to take their lives. So there's people all over the world that have been putting these things strategically. What a beautiful legacy to leave behind. And that's what I mean by something good is coming out of this. And I told her yeah,
I agree. It's a good example of, between those two people, because the woman who blasted you on LinkedIn could do something similar, right? It just comes down to whether or not we maybe are willing to look. I think the big piece of it a lot of the time is we something happens, we take on the pain, and it's easier to just hang on to that and assume the victim role and say that this was done to me than it is to say, well, maybe there's a reason for this, or maybe even if it's not a reason, maybe there's something else in it that I can pull out, that maybe there's a lesson, maybe there's something I can do with this. And it's just a perspective shift, right? It's looking for something to make you feel better.
Right. Well, not only that too, it's all about, like you were saying, this is where we have choice in our life. Right. Crap happens to everybody. It's just what you do with that. How are you going to make a difference? Are you going to become a victim of it? That's a choice. Or are you going to make something out of that?
Yep.
And, tragedy happens all the time. It gives us the opportunity, yes, to experience, I think, contrast at its depths, but also it gives you the opportunity to, allow your soul to grow at a very deep level if you choose to go there. And, it's not for the faint of heart. It's just like, I'm not going to say that it's a cakewalk and it's easy. Everybody's here doing the best that they can. And for some people, they're going to be the victim. And then for some people, they're going to make something out of their lives. It's all choice. That's where free will comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a very tough topic. With 9/11, the unconscious, right, of course, looked at it and reacted in ways that were not productive, right, obviously. Creating more of a police state, right, taking away some of our freedoms, things like that, which were reactionary. But the conscious ones, I think that the people who were awakened, or maybe became awakened as a result of this, right? I hope that would outweigh all the damage that was done. That the unconscious will prevail over the reaction, but the ripple down effect is still ongoing, right?
Oh,
because we're still in wars as a result of 9/11. The wars are still continuing, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we have not really stopped, and we did. Some of us did, right? Some of us did. What has happened? Why have we been attacked as a nation on this outrageous, fantastical scale, right? That,
Yeah.
you know, on the, like, if you had like a big picture view, metaphysical view, like, and if you thought about this, what is this message that we're getting? And again, it's about a choice, right? So we're looking at this challenge, huge event, and now we get to choose what we're going to make of it.
Right.
And so part of us, some of us chose this way, and you're one of them, and you went into this and felt this was your sort of like calling to now go and make it your life's purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
While others decided, I think we had a few interviews when people said, that's when I decided to join the Marines and go on fight, you know. Mm-hmm. So people made choice. Who was that? I remember there was like a couple.
Yep, there was a few of them. A couple of them were, I think, sports figures as well. You know, they went back and they decided this was their opportunity to call. And, you know, I think when you look in a bigger perspective too, the natural progression of like humanity sometimes, or the natural response is to react. And I think there was a lot of react that happened because of that, but there was also the contemplative aspect of it as well. So you got to see the whole continuum of response, basically. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it was just amplified because it was on such an international level, really, you know, instead of really individual in your backyard. But, you know.
Tim, just to finish it off, because I was just listening to the NPR today, and there was, you know, the whole talk about the school shooting, right? And they were basically seeing how the police responded and whether they made any mistakes that, you know, if they hadn't made them, would have not resulted in the loss of life unnecessarily. You know, and so there's one father who basically said that when this report became, I guess, published, right, and he saw it, and he said, if they didn't do this and this, if they did that faster, if they reacted when they were supposed to, he said, precisely, if they reacted when they were supposed to, my daughter would have still been alive, he said. And I'm listening to this on the radio. And it just occurred to me, if we as a society had reacted when we were supposed to address the mental issues of these kids who found no other way of letting this thing out than shooting people.
Yep.
That's when the reaction had to be, not when the father, of course, desperate and.
Well, but the argument though from the metaphysical side is that everything is happening as it is supposed to. We weren't supposed to do anything differently.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's some lesson coming out of this stuff.
So now we are faced with this. Now, what do we learn from it? Do we now try to improve our safety?
This is the thing, but you don't know what you learn from it necessarily right away. It might
sometimes
take decades
that's very
before
true.
we figure that out.
Absolutely, because it's all in, you know, when you're sometimes in the middle of something, you know, I think we've all had our individual situations where you're in the middle of something and you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and then finally you're on the other side of it and you could look back and see how everything lined up the way it was supposed to get to where it needed to. And it's just really fascinating because sometimes you just, when you're caught up in the middle of it, you can't see the forest from the trees. Yeah. And it's just like you are, you know, and I think sometimes that happens because we have to rely on our blind faith and trust sometimes, which sometimes when you don't see it in front of you, it's just like, it's scary as hell because there's no reference point and you don't know, you know, sometimes you think, okay, you're by yourself and you're abandoned. You're not. You're never alone because the other side is closer to you than you could ever imagine. Your loved ones who have passed on, they just walk through a doorway and they just drop their physical bodies. My parents are here all the time. Both of them passed away, you know, 6 and 7 years ago. I have, you know, so it's just like, do I miss them? Absolutely. Do I miss the physicality of them? Absolutely. But do I feel even more connected to them? absolutely, than when they were alive. And so that just goes to tell you that number one, you're never alone. Even though you can't see or even sense something, they're there. For people who are starting to wake up and increase their work, doing the work on themselves, doing the healing that they need to do, raising your frequency, you're going to be able to tap into that more so over time than you had a year or two ago, because it's easier for them to come to a higher vibrating place than it is to a lower vibrating place when you don't work on yourself. Mm. So it's like when they say the veils are getting very thin, they are. More and more people are starting to wake up consciously. So as that happens, their vibration, it's like a battery pack. They have a vibration that raises the whole of humanity, and it makes it easier to access the other side.
That's very interesting what you're saying, Dolores. Remember that example. Is a falling tree making a sound if nobody...
The tree falls in the forest, yeah.
Right. So to me, when I started kind of like contemplating that, right, I was thinking, if you are able to think and feel the presence of the past loved one, that means you are a vibrational receiver to that energy. So you are that human ear, that could hear that tree falling.
Right, exactly.
But if you're not,
right,
then there is no sound.
Exactly. Very true.
To carry that out a little farther, and I wrote a little about this in my first book, is that not only is there no sound, but there's no tree. If you can't hear it, there's no forest.
That's right.
Forest.
Exactly.
It's just another vibration.
I had lunch with a friend of mine yesterday, and we got into this stuff a little bit. And I said, my house doesn't exist right now. I can't see it. I can't experience it. It doesn't physically exist till I come back to where it's supposed to be, and there it is again.
Right.
So yeah, I mean.
So that elevates this point. What you pay attention to becomes real.
Yeah.
That's very true.
It's not real until
you pay attention to it.
Yeah.
And a new appreciation of this thing that actually came with Abraham's teaching. I was like, oh my God, that's right. But on the other side of it, if you don't pay attention to it, it goes away. So change the focus from the negative things, right?
Well, that's it. So, and then, that goes a step further, that we're all incredible manifestors. We're really good at creating the things that we don't want and the things we want. So it's like, putting the attention on, okay, the house isn't there, so you're going to create the house isn't there.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So, or the house is there, it's beautiful, the yard is beautiful, the cat is playing and purring, whatever you want to create. So it's really about just tapping into the feeling of what you want to create as well. And I'm going in this direction with this because how many times in life human beings really are leery of feeling, okay? They tap their toe in the pool of emotions, and it scares the crap out of them, and they just retract into their mind, which is a disconnect from being in their physical body. So it's like you marrying the mind and the heart together in order to be grounded in your physical body so you could actually feel and have an experience, because that's where the contrast is. And some people, I know I was guilty of this, and we come from our lineage where this was handed down. It's just like, it's not okay to feel, pretend it's not there, it'll go away type of thing.
Walk it off.
Just walk it off. No, it's still there because
my ankles are broken. Now walk it off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, that's like a topic for another conversation, but it's still about, feeling and perception that are so essential to us being human beings. So we get to experience the whole gamut of emotions, and with the emotions comes the contrast. So how we're going to experience that, what we're going to do with that. It's just like, it's almost the secret sauce of life, being human, emotions. That's,
yeah, well, you know,
for lack of a better description.
It's a mixed bag, right? Because people who don't ever have it presented to them don't understand that the contrast means there's opportunity for growth, right?
Exactly.
And so they only see that this is painful and I don't like it and I want to avoid it. Right?
Exactly.
And then maybe something happens and they're forced to go through some crap, and on the other side of it, they do grow out of it, and they can look back and go, oh, that was beneficial for me in the long run.
Right.
So maybe the next time around I'm a little less afraid. But, you know, then there's the other side where people who have had these ideas brought to them already, then they see it and go, I don't like it, but I welcome it because it means there's a possibility for growth.
Right, right.
I'm not big on the idea that everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
As if this is what's supposed to happen because it's happened to you. But in the sense that everything happens, the reason being that there's an opportunity there if you want to go look for it.
Absolutely.
And it might be 15 different kinds of opportunities in the same event.
And the thing is, maybe the reason is to have that opportunity. So
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so
it's different opportunities for different people from the same event, and maybe different opportunities. So I was just saying, different opportunities for the same person.
Exactly.
It depends on what you want to look at.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. And, you know, it's like we are so blessed to have an enriched, you know, experience here on Earth. And actually, you know, we're in such an interesting time in humanity's evolution that we even chose to be here at this time to witness this. This is huge.
Yeah.
You know, when you look back over the last 120 years of what has transpired in technology, in advancements in medicine and advancement in humanity and, you know, you name it. It's just like there's been so much growth in the last 120 years, and probably the most of it has been in the last 40 years. And
or even less than that. Yeah.
Exactly.
And the internet was a quantum leap in every field.
No kidding.
Because there's no longer any shortage of information. There's no longer any difficulty in getting information.
Yeah.
With all that said, though, we're still barbarians, guys. You know, I hope that I get reborn into the enlightened society. Because
well, you know
we're
what?
still killing each other. We are fighting.
Yeah, but you can't have,
better technology.
all enlightenment without light without dark.
Bomb, you know, I mean, come on. So,
it's all part of the same thing. You can't have light without dark.
There's acceleration, but what is accelerating? All these goods and material
Well,
things.
you know, the other thing you got to list, and I'm a firm believer in this, and I know that this is kind of happening too on many different aspects, is that humanity's growth potential is continuing to be pushed. And we're getting downloads energetically. It's almost very similar to like a new program update in a computer. Okay? So, you know, we get an updated version of Microsoft, whatever, and sometimes we need to download it and then reboot the computer. Okay, so it's no different than us energetically. And I've seen this from a medical aspect because probably over the last 10 to 15 years, people would be coming in with these really strange things that were mimicking like a heart attack or some type of really acute health problem. The emergency department would run a battery of tests, wouldn't find anything wrong. In 2 days, the person was fine. So what was happening, energetically, you're taking in a lot of higher frequency. Your body is recalibrating itself so it's more aligned with that higher vibration, so it mimics all this other stuff as it's trying to reboot itself to be up here at vibrating at a higher frequency.
Kind of like a cleanse a little bit, no?
Yeah, definitely, but it's like getting an upgraded version.
All the junk.
Right, and it shows up,
Yeah.
exactly, and it's showing up as things that people...
If we can make it, because what my daughter is an activist, you know, Dolores, right?
Yes.
She's with, with the global warming people.
Yeah, yeah.
What's the name of the president who lost to Bush? I forget.
What's his name? Yes.
I mean, it's right on my tongue.
I see his face too. What is it?
I'm so excited I just can't hide it.
Clinton's vice president.
Gore.
Yeah.
Gore.
So she's with Gore and she's doing these presentations. And recently she, our family went through this discharging event when she came. Actually, Lana had to go and get her.
I remember,
Depression, right? And I had so many conversations with her, and you know what? And I tried to get her out of this way and that way, whatever way that I thought could work. And one of them was, well, who said this isn't the right path for us to destroy the earth?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this is our push for getting into space, and we're gonna just barely make it and get deployed into space and escape annihilation. I mean, it could be a positive thing.
It's all how you look at it. It's all how you look at it. Look at it, if you go to a forest fire analogy, right? For a little bunny rabbit running around in the middle of the forest, it ain't a lot of fun.
No, it's not.
Right? But it's necessary, and that is how the forest renews itself and stays alive. And
listen, we need a push. We need a push to get.
We're not going to do it on our own.
We don't usually, right?
No, we're comfortable in the box. We don't want to get out.
Yeah. This is our vessel. We're going to destroy it to the point when, okay, we can't be here no more. Let's build some stations. And we're going to just proceed.
But you know what?
Thank God it's unlimited. It's infinity.
Yes, I know. And, it's like, I think this is kind of funny because I have a totally different viewpoint on the whole global warming thing. And I kind of feel that global warming has been around since the creation of the Earth. Mm-hmm. We've had these polar ice ages, and it's just like we're just living through this right now and seeing this. We're experiencing. I'm not negating that there are definitely things that we could be doing to help Mother Earth. There was this Facebook meme that kind of came out recently, and it was about Mother Earth doing a play on a counter, like how we pollute Mother Earth. When Mother Earth was polluting these people, Tim's nodding his head. I think he saw this. I
didn't dig into it, but I remember what you're talking about.
Oh my God, it was hilarious because this is what people. Basically, Mother Earth was treating people the way she's been treated, like polluting her water, polluting her air, stomping on her and really destroying her. It was really well done, I thought, but it was funny too because she has people like down at the tailpipe of a car breathing in the exhaust type of thing, and they're like gasping for air. So it was just like, it really drove home the point that, we really need to be mindful of what we're doing. And believe me, I'm into recycling. I'm into, decreasing the amount of garbage. I mean, it breaks my heart to see the oceans just polluted with so much plastic that the wildlife who live there are dying off because they're ingesting all this stuff and they can't gain nutrients in order to survive. So there's definitely things that we could be doing, but there's still, this has been a process that happens, over billions of years, and we're just seeing maybe an acceleration of it, especially with global warming. I mean, I've noticed in the 30 years that I've been out in California, things have really different climately, and we've had more humidity in our summers the last 5 to 10 years than I remember 30 years.
Hi, this is Tim Starr. Thanks for joining me and Gabi on the universe between your ears. We really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us for a little while. And we'd like to see you again. So be sure to subscribe wherever it is you're consuming the podcast from, whether it's YouTube or Stitcher or iTunes or whatever the hell else is out there. We want to see you again. We also want to hear from you. So let us know what you think of each episode. Let us know if you got an idea for a future episode that you think would be just killer. Absolutely, let us know. All right? Thanks again, and we will see you next time around. Bye-bye.